Hi, folks. Steve Urban here. Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by Marketing 360. My good friend JB Kellogg and his team do such a fantastic job for us and so many other companies. Marketing 360 is the number one platform for small business, and it's everything you need to grow your business. If you need marketing support, I really encourage you to contact them at marketing360.com/Riderflex, and we'll add that link to the description of this episode for easy reference. On today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, we have guest Sophia Ruffolo. She's the co-founder and CEO of Fembot, a nonprofit community of smart, driven, and passionate advocates who take action towards leveling the playing field. Sophia Ruffolo on the Riderflex podcast. How you doing, Sophia?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I've been trying to get you on the show for a while, so I'm glad we could get it scheduled.
Me too. Me too.
All right. Are you in, let's see, you're in Chicago. Do you live in Toronto, but you're in Chicago today, or what's, I can't remember where you live.
I was, when we first started chatting, I was in Toronto and we moved back to Chicago in February. What an interesting time to move.
Right. I bet that was crazy. Yeah. For the listeners, by the way, we're recording this particular episode on May 5th, 2020. So we're still in the coronavirus situation across the globe. Although I hope we're in the fourth quarter of it anyway, of the ball game. But yeah, moving during that.
My fingers over
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, moving during that, I bet was fun, huh?
Yeah. It was interesting. It's certainly interesting to host. We went back and forth a few times hosting events in both countries, and then finally our last event was 2 days before Illinois closed everything down. So we were just under the wire there.
Wow. Well, for the listeners, before we get into Fembot, tell them about yourself, just personally, overview, family, where you grew up, where you went to school, things like that.
Those always seem like simple questions, and then you ask them of me. I lived on 4 continents before I was 1 year old.
Oh, so that's similar to Erica Pearson, my buddy Erica, right? So you moved around a lot, huh?
I did. I love Erica. And yeah, travel is a way of life in my family.
Well, okay, so you moved around a bunch when you were a kid. What did your folks do?
So they were just figuring out where they were going to live. So I was born in England. My dad's side of the family is British. My mom's side is Israeli. My dad had work in Africa, so we went to Africa, and then we went to Israel from there, and then ended up in Canada. And then I was in Canada until I was in high school, and then I moved to the States. And I am more American than Canadian, but I've definitely been dabbling in both.
Do you have like dual citizenship, or how does that work?
I have permanent residency in Canada, and then I'm a citizen of the U.S. And so we'll see what happens because we just moved back. So we'll evaluate. We take life day by day.
Okay. And were you the only child? Did you have some siblings? Tell us a little bit about growing up.
Yeah, you know what? I was an only child, but I was pretty lucky. I spent the summers I lived with my cousins. So for 2-3 months a year, I was a semi-sibling.
I see. Okay. And where do your folks live now?
My mom's in Nashville, and poor thing is she's stay at home and just lost power for 2 days.
Ooh, that sucks.
I know. It's terrible. We're trying to figure out what to do for her. And my dad, before he passed away, was in Thailand.
He was.
They like to be in a lot of countries.
Wow. Okay. So, and how many countries have you been to now? Have you ever added it up?
You know what? I would say probably 20 or 30, most of the European countries, some of the Eastern European. And then I have been to Thailand, but I have never added it up.
Favorite place of all time? Like if you had to be stranded in a particular place, yeah, where would that be?
Taking family aside, because they're going to listen, I think Lake Como was the most beautiful place I've ever been.
Where's that?
It's in Italy. It's the lake region, so it's northern Italy. I think it's right by the border of Switzerland, and but kind of by the mountains. And it's just Lake Como is very pristine. If you've seen the Bellagio Hotel in Vegas, like sort of that's the supposed to be a take on the Bellagio.
I see.
Which is one of the cities. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay. I didn't know that. All right. So do you travel a bunch now still? Is that still a big thing for you?
I do. We try. I visit my family in Israel once a year. I was supposed to go last month, but obviously with the pandemic, we were we pushed that off. But in last year, actually, we spent 6 weeks away, and we were in Israel, and then we checked out Vienna, Budapest, and Slovenia and Bratislava, which I had not been to any of those places, and they were gorgeous.
Sweet. Oh, very nice. Okay, so high school in Canada. Did you know that you wanted to go to law school when you were in high school, or did you not decide that until you got to college? Talk to us about college and decisions around law school, all of that stuff. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So it's interesting. So I moved right before high school to Nashville, and that was different. It's not the Nashville that people think of today. That wasn't that wasn't what it's like. And then I went to school for college in Virginia. I was actually a voice major, and then dropped voice, and had to graduate on time, so I was a French major because that was my minor at the time. And I had always wanted to help people, and not everybody thinks of law, especially in financial services, as helping people, but it's analyzing things, it's keeping business moving forward, it's getting a person from not knowing if they can do something to having clarity on a subject. And my grandfather was a criminal lawyer, which I always admired him and his work. He was one of the true, old good ones that accepted chickens as payment when people couldn't pay.
Are you serious? Yeah. Are you serious? Now, you sure that wasn't just him telling stories, or was that true? That's pretty cool.
You know what? I hear that from a lot of people. So and he was, they say, that people always crack the joke, but the last honest lawyer. But he was, cool. He was cool. Definitely somebody who would help anyone and everyone that he could. So I like to take after him.
Okay. And how did you decide which law school to go to? I'm just curious.
I wanted to be in a big urban environment, and so applied to in DC and in Boston and Chicago, and then picked from there. And I'm a White Sox fan, so.
Oh, you are? Okay.
That didn't hurt. That didn't hurt.
All right. So then you moved to Chicago to go to school, finish law school.
Mm-hmm. That's when I became a Bears fan. And now I like the White Sox, but I love the Bears. Love the Bears. I'm a little bit crazy about it, and I'm convinced that the season will start on time.
I'm convinced that the season will start on time. Yeah. Going back to the coronavirus situation, if football season doesn't start on time, that is going to be so depressing. I mean,
I'm holding out hope.
Yeah, that'll be.
I have faith. I
mean, you're talking about the number one sport in the country. Not just NFL. I mean, think about colleges, high schools, all that. Oh my gosh, that would be a killer. Right. Okay. Okay, so when you get out of law school, walk us through your early career, some of your early career, and then how that eventually transitioned into you wanting to be an entrepreneur and start Fembot. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. So I spent 20 years mitigating risk and then went into something that I would consider one of the riskiest things you could do with your life. And that's entrepreneurship.
That's
But
funny.
I started as an estate planning lawyer, so really helping people through difficult times, loss of loved ones, planning for the next phases of people's lives, and just really being there for our clients, and then also working with banks who were doing the same as trust companies and fiduciaries. And so my background really is trust law, which then morphed into securities law. And I was in private practice at some of the large law firms for about 10 years in Chicago, and left. My last law firm was Sidley Austin, and went into a U.S. bank as their trust and securities counsel there, and worked in-house. And it was owned, the parent company was a Canadian bank. So it was really interesting to be, having been in Canada and then in the States, then working for a company that was owned by a Canadian parent. That's very unusual. It's usually the reverse. We see a lot of that. And got a chance to really work with some great people in the States, and then got tapped to go up to Canada, got promoted. I had worked on some merger and acquisition stuff where essentially they took two banks together and ended up with the 11th largest bank in I think North America, or potentially even in the US. And so then they moved me up to Canada, relocated me up there. And I thought, and this is naivete because I hadn't been in Canada for a long time, I thought that everything was the same. And I got up there and realized it is not. So 2 things you should know if you're ever going to move to Canada. Cell service, you want Wi-Fi because data is extraordinarily expensive.
Oh, it is.
And it's like beyond expensive. There is no such thing as unlimited data.
Okay.
And the other thing is tax on alcohol is extraordinary.
Really?
And
wow. Okay.
so
Didn't know that.
enjoy the cost of alcohol.
Didn't know that.
So those are my 2 tips for anyone who's moving up to Canada. I can give more. But I moved sort of out of law and more into an advisory role as the chief compliance officer for one of the wealth and securities divisions, and from there did a whole host of risk management roles. And the last thing I did there really got me interested in kind of the venture capital space, the deal side of things, seeing entrepreneurs succeed. And so that's a bit about how Fembot was born, because I was very interested in the kind of girls just want to have funding. I have a sign right behind me.
I like that. I like it. You got that trademarked?
You know what? I don't know that they'll let you trademark it because it's so close to the other one, but we definitely have all of the elements around it.
I like it.
Trademarked.
But that's how you. So you started dealing with entrepreneurs and startups and cash raises, and you started dealing with those circles, and is that what got your interest?
So it was 2 things. So there's 2 elements really to Fembot. One is we have an online platform and global women's business directory. And that was born out of me wanting to spend my income, discretionary and non-discretionary income, on women business owners, and wondering if I was even doing it.
I
and
see.
realized I was not. And so started to look at how to find women businesses. And at the time, there really wasn't anything like what Fembot is, where we crossed all geographies, all industries, all sizes and scale of business. So as a hobby, I just put a list together and told people about it. People got really excited. They started using our list. They
And
started
the list,
buying
the,
from the women.
and the list was like a list of women-owned companies or women with founded. I see.
Exactly.
And there was no, there was not a list like that. You could just Google and it just popped up.
As shocking as that may sound, and today there are some lists out there, but nothing like ours that spans
Wow.
geographies or spans
Wow.
industries. What we found was everything was very niche. So you might have a tech one for Toronto
I see.
that you have to be a member to access it. So a lot of the lists out there are membership based.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I mean, now people are starting to ask their clients questions. Like we've heard from some of the corporate folks that we work with at some of the tech companies that's data they're aggregating now. But when they started and built their platforms, they didn't aggregate that data. So we were really surprised that there wasn't a Google for women businesses. And so we decided essentially out of passion to create that. um,
But
and and then
let me ask you a question real quick. I just want to make sure I understand real fast. So at first, this was you were interested and passionate about women-owned businesses, and you were trying to find a list and you couldn't find one. And so you kind of built one yourself, and then people showed interest in your list. That's kind of how it did.
yeah,
Did I summarize that right? That's kind of how it got started.
it really is how it got started. And then
Okay.
women started hiring one another on the directory. So
Oh,
because
I see.
they, you know, once it existed,
I see.
people were aligned to it. They believed in it, especially our
Ah,
early adopters. And
I gotcha. Okay, so now you got this group or this organization or this club, and people are like, man, I really, I want to make sure I hire I don't know, I specifically want a female CEO for this brand. I can go to Fembot and see a list and boom, stuff like that.
yeah. Yeah, more like I want somebody in construct to build my house. And are there any women-owned construction
I
companies?
see. Okay, very good.
Or,
Now, when you started building this list, yeah, did you say, okay, I want to make this a nonprofit? Like, when did you come up with the business model of the list, I guess, right? How did you, because at some point you're probably had to be like, right, well, this is cool and all, and I like helping people, but what's the business model? Walk me into that
yeah,
transition.
I wish I could say that it was like
A master
logical and
plan.
linear.
It never is. Every time I interview an entrepreneur, they always say, hey, look, there was no like perfect plan that I followed. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's totally
Yeah.
true. What Fembot is today, and we're actually in the process of applying for 501c3 status as
I
a
see.
charity
Okay, good.
and having a for-profit business. But we started as a not-for-profit because we knew we wanted to help people. We knew we would qualify as a not-for-profit. And we hadn't formulated all of the elements of it. Funny thing is, I just went back and looked at exactly what we filed, and it's exactly what we're doing, but
Really?
we didn't know the scope and scale of it
Wow.
at the time. And what happened from there was, and it was a bit in tandem, as I mentioned, with my last role of kind of looking at deals and reviewing some of the deal documents, is people started coming to us for advice.
I see.
And so now they wanted either referrals or they wanted advice on how to build a business, how to scale a business, how to, number one question, get money.
Yeah, how to get
And
money.
so from there, Girls Just Want to Have Funding was born. And so we had these couple of elements to it with this advice piece that we hadn't quite figured out how we were going to fit that all in. And fast forward to today, we've got the advice component, and then we've got the education component, and we've got the directory component, and we're keeping them, I mean, all under the same brand, but really functioning as different things with different different focus,
I see.
essentially.
I see. Let's do this. How about can you give us, if you were to stand up on a stage right now and give the 5-minute overview of what Fembot is today, give it to us.
Okay, my elevator pitch.
Yeah, give the elevator. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so we're in and at our core, we are a community. But what that community is an online platform, an online women's business directory that's global. We're in over 100 cities, over 10 countries, and then we are an education hub. And that education hub has two main components. One is our very strong focus on funding education. So how do you build a business, and how do you get money for it? And that can be, you put your own money in, you get a loan, you get a grant, you get venture capital dollars, and why you should and shouldn't be doing that, and the education around that, which has quite sophisticated lending and securities underpinnings and all of that. And so that's not something that every person has that background. And so we felt, and my directors who are also have similar backgrounds to me, we felt like that's where we can offer a lot of value to people that they don't necessarily otherwise get, and break it down, essentially translate from, very difficult concepts to English and entrepreneur speak.
Okay.
And so that's one component of the education. The other component of the education is just your basic everyday needs, like business 101 stuff, like where do I go to get a bank account? Do I need a bank account? How do I get registered? How do I do SEO? How do I do an email funnel? And I've got some funny stories about email funnels if you, if you ever want to know.
Okay.
They're easy to screw up.
Right, exactly. And these services, the two that you're describing so far now, is that I get that information for free, or do I have to sign up? Do I have to pay for it? How does that work?
Yeah, so we're membership based, and we have different tiers of membership, but keeping in mind that it's membership based as in you get all of these services, but the directory is free to the public.
Okay.
So always open to the public. The idea is you want to find a person to clean your house, we've got it. You need somebody to cut your hair, we've got it. And so you come, and we're essentially getting the brands out there, helping the consumer conscience in terms of awareness. So that free to the public portion, then there's all of the things behind that, which is we promote. We do a lot of promotion of our members on social media and to our community, because our community at large is made up of entrepreneurs and people who support entrepreneurs. 700 members in the directory, 10,000 people who are supporters around the globe. And you need them both. And then we've got corporate partners and sponsors and supporters and who help us and work with us as a collective, essentially, to provide negotiated rates to our members that are beneficial. Like, you think of, there's a lot of different groups out there negotiating on behalf of a collective. We do that for our members, and they get incredibly valuable services at much lower rates without, our rule is you can't compromise on the service. So just if you give it to us at a discounted rate, it still needs to be that caliber. But when you think about what it is that we're offering. And we offer that to anyone who's a member, which we just extended membership to include emerging entrepreneurs, to include allies, so supporters. Let's say you wanted to support Fembot, you could become a member. You can't be on the directory. We don't necessarily showcase your business per se as a member of the directory, but we might say and do a shout out to you or on social media saying thank you for being a supporter of Fembot. And you'd get access to some of our trainings and meetups and things like that, which and you can have some like a designation that's proudly Fembot that you can put on your website showing that you support women entrepreneurs. So we're very much of the mindset that our supporter community is very important in terms of fostering our member base.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like a lot for you to juggle. What's the team size now? Because it's been in business for what, you've been in business for 3 years, 2 years?
So we registered on LinkedIn a few years ago, and so it shows up as a little bit more mature than it is. We officially launched in August of 2018, so
Okay.
we're going to come up on 2 years in August. And so that's pretty exciting.
Nice.
That's
How many employees or volunteers, or what's the team look like?
Yeah, so I'll say pre-COVID, and we'll get back to COVID because right now, everything's
I
at a
hear
bit of
you.
a standstill with events. Although we are doing a virtual gala, so I'm pretty excited. Get your
Oh,
pants
cool.
and shoes on.
What? Are you serious? Virtual
Yeah.
gala. Now, how's that gonna? All right. You'd need to like get your TV plugged in with like a camera in your living room. I'm just thinking that through. Anyway, let's come back to the gala.
Yeah, we'll come
Yes.
back to that. So, with all our volunteers, we had about 25 people that were
Ooh.
working on different things. I mean, not full time.
Yeah.
In terms of contractors and people supporting us, there were about 10 of us who kind of were dedicated, and most of the people who work with us either work most of their time with someone else or are full-time employees elsewhere and just doing this on the side. And then we have a huge volunteer team because our events are over 100 people, and we like to have a good volunteer team that can just make it really seamless and a really, really nice experience where people are networking meaningfully, where it's not just, if we see somebody standing by themselves, we try to introduce them to someone else. We want it to be a really good experience, and then ensuring that kind of our content is always, we'll have founders, we'll have funders, investors, and then we'll have industry experts on whatever topic that we're covering to give people a sense of really how to be a business.
When you think about other organizations like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, or Vistage, or all the rest of these groups and organizations you can join to be around, or YPO, or all this other stuff. Yours is a little bit different because it's women focused, number one, and because it also provides not just collaboration and gatherings, but true services you can sign up for. Does that sound right? Does that sound right?
It. That's exactly right. That and one other nuance is, a lot of times what people appreciate about us is that we're not your typical trade association. So it's not the same people over and over again. You're really networking. Like a website developer doesn't always hire another web developer, but they will hire a brand specialist or a copywriter. And so we actually, by the way we set ourselves up intentionally, is to have the opportunity for people to do business together.
I see. Okay, I like it. Great. Now you're going to hit your 2-year mark in August. I'm assuming you just bootstrapped this by yourself, or did you have a co-founder? Talk to us about the getting started and quitting your full-time job that paid you, and then doing this that paid you nothing. Talk to us about those fun stages right in there, because a lot of our listeners are aspiring entrepreneurs or early stage founders, and so I'm always fascinated with the hey, how did you eat and pay the rent while you built this story? So go ahead,
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about that.
That's the $1 million question, right?
Right.
So I bootstrapped. I have a couple of co-founders. So
Ah,
one in particular that we had the idea together, but financially, I was sort of running that piece of it. We're now coming together and creating our one of our subsidiary entities that we're all kind of going in together to build our technology platform. And so that piece of it, I mean, in the early days we were sort of sharing costs, but then I kind of took off running, and they're working full time, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna accept the responsibility for the financials for this period. But what's interesting about it was we have talked a lot about whether we would go out and get investor dollars, and while we'd rather be a little bit more mature company
okay.
before we did that, for a variety of reasons. One, we think the value will be higher at that stage, and two, we want to see if it, how far we can take it on our own. Now, for the listeners, you need a 6 to 12 month runway minimum before you go out and get investor dollars. So don't wait till the last minute.
Right. Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. Don't think, okay, oh, well, we're going to be out of cash in 2 months, so we need to raise cash in 60 days. Yeah. It's not going to go like that.
Yeah, no, not even a loan. So you're not even going to get a loan. But
Right.
it was, and we started making money in our first full year.
Oh, great. Oh, good for you. Wow. Now, when you say making money, you mean producing revenue that hits the bank, or like actually profitable on the bottom line? Yeah. What?
Depends on how you think about capital expenditures.
Right. Depends on how much you're paying yourself in payroll,
Yeah.
basically.
So let's just say I did not pay myself, and
Okay.
most people will tell you to pay yourself.
Yeah.
And I go back and forth because as an estate planner, like, I think, why would I take ordinary income? It's like,
Exactly.
and so that I have some of my own things that I have to think through on that
Right.
front. But
Right.
from the perspective of from the perspective of uh, paying yourself generally, I would recommend to everybody else to go ahead to go ahead and do that. And I don't know why, but my brain just froze for a second, so I might need you to repeat the question.
Well, the main thing I'm after is, people always, I think people are fascinated with how founders got started. They're always thinking to themselves, well, man, like, how did she do that? Did she have a bunch of savings, and then she quit her job, and then she bootstrapped it and lived off of her savings, and then didn't pay herself the first year and put all the money back in the company? And then how soon did she, I think there's a lot of people out there that have ideas to start a business. I think there's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, but they're scared, or they don't have the funds, or they're trapped into, they're leveraged on a mortgage for their home or whatever. And so they're driving to work every day in their car going, God, I really want to start my furniture business, but damn, how do I do that? Like, how am I going to live and pay the mortgage for the next 12 months? So that's why I like to ask these questions on how you survived.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you quit your full-time job. You probably had some money built up that you lived off of personally, and then you invested a little bit of that cash by bootstrapping the business, using your own personal cash to bootstrap, but didn't pay yourself payroll. It sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's right. And what I remember, what we were saying that my brain froze there for me was we had revenue coming in.
And you had, yeah.
We had a decent amount of revenue come in 2019. We were forecasted for a very good year for 2020, and we had plans to start paying ourselves this year
I see.
when the pandemic hit. So we're probably going to push that out, obviously,
Okay.
probably about 6 months. But for the listeners, what I'll say is if you have a full-time job and you can do it as a side hustle, test the waters, make some mistakes, that's a really nice cushion to have.
Yeah.
To figure out what you're doing. For the first year, through all of ideation, and then for about the first year of Fembot, I was working full time.
Okay, there we go. Thank you for sharing that. All right.
So it really has only been the last year where I've transitioned out, and we knew we were moving back.
Okay, so the year that you decide to quit your paying job and do this thing full time, then boom, the coronavirus hits, and you're like, "Oh my God, the worst possible time for me to do this."
It really is. It's an exercise in positivity.
Positivity.
and one of the things we decided, and actually it's been fantastic from a company perspective too, is we moved in with my in-laws. So we came back to Chicago. We were going to move into our condo that we had. It was being rented. Our tenant couldn't move out because of all the things that were happening, and we said, don't worry about it, we'll move in with my in-laws and we'll figure this out. And so it's just really honestly being flexible and agile like that, just in life. And if you're that flexible in life, you can be flexible in business. We actually have had April was our best member month ever.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. I just looked at the books today, which I've learned to do myself. Those are the things you learn to do, is all of that kind of stuff.
There's another good tip for any aspiring entrepreneurs out there. I highly encourage you to keep your eyes on the checkbook as your business grows the first 5 years. Don't be just handing that off to anybody. And I've seen so many people get in trouble with that. Anyway, not to go down a rabbit hole.
No, I totally agree. I will cement that, because for the first year, because I was working, I'm like, oh, I'll just buy this or I'll just do that. And then year two, I'm like, oh no, I'm not spending my money on that. There's no value in it, or you pick and choose. So I do agree. And if you know when people say know your numbers, they mean literally know every line item to the penny, because
yep.
That's how you know if it's working.
I totally agree. Now, does everybody work virtually? I'm guessing it's a virtual company, no office building.
Yeah, we're all virtual. I mean, our events were all in person, and that was actually where we made most of our revenue. So that's why, obviously, we have to take a step back. So membership's been fantastic, but now we'll test the waters of a virtual event. But all our folks are all over the world. We had folks doing stuff for us from New Zealand and Australia and Bali and all over Canada and the US. So it's we are very, very, very flexible from that perspective, and adept at figuring out the online.
Riderflex is 100% virtual. All of our recruiters, everybody that works for the company, we're 100% virtual. We can be, because we're we're a recruiting firm and we just deal with candidates, virtually. And it's wonderful for us. We didn't have to make any adjustments, when the coronavirus hit, because we already worked virtually.
Which is huge. That's a really important.
I'm a huge fan of the saving money on paying for an expensive office building.
Right. Yeah. I do like going into co-working spaces. We did have a couple of memberships here and there, just now and then for the camaraderie, for the
Yeah,
in-person camaraderie.
yeah. I agree. I do miss the in-person happy hours. I've tried to have a couple of virtual happy hours, and it's okay, but it's not the same.
No, it's definitely not the same. I'll be interested to see what you think of our cocktail portion of our virtual gala, because
Oh,
we've got some neat stuff. But you do have to be a little bit more creative from
yeah.
that perspective to keep people engaged, but not talking over one another.
Yeah, I bet so, huh? So congratulations, by the way, on getting it to where it's at, as of today. You've been in business for almost 2 years. You have revenue. You haven't had to take on any outsider cash and give up a bunch of equity, right?
Yep, and no debt.
And no debt. I mean, hey, and you're surviving. You're living. It's like, hey,
Right.
you haven't folded shop and gone back and get a lawyer job, which you could do. I guess that's a safety
Mm,
net, right? You could always just go do that if you had to.
right.
But you haven't had to do that. So congratulations on making it this far.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you were giving, you've already given lots of advice, but just give you one more chance here as we head towards wrap up. If there's somebody else out there thinking about starting some sort of organization or club of some kind similar to this, maybe it's not even a nonprofit, but somebody else with an idea like that, whatever it might be, what advice would you have for them today?
Oh, I have several pieces of advice. My number one piece of advice is do it. Go
Do it.
for it.
Go for
Try it.
it.
I say that every time I get asked the question of advice. And if you're passionate, if you have that sparkle in your eye, if you're smiling and you can feel the energy bouncing off the other person, they're soaking up your energy and they're getting excited, you have a good idea, go for it. The difference between an idea and a business is the sweat that you put in it. And so just know that's a hard road. You're gonna do great if you're passionate about it.
Love it. Love it. What else? Were you going to mention something else? I know it's a loaded question. You could probably talk for
Yeah.
30 minutes. Was there something else in particular there? I know that you could probably do 45 minutes on just that, but you're,
My
go ahead.
oh, my other tip, and I vary between a few, but this one I think for somebody who was starting an organization is go out and find a few organizations and follow them and gauge what you like and what you don't like about them.
I see.
Gauge how much people in their communities and organizations are engaged and how they're engaging them, and see if it resonates with you, because the best form of imitation is the best form of flattery. And so imitate the people, give them credit where you're supposed to, especially on the IP stuff. But really take lessons. I take ideas from all kinds of people all the time, and then I thank them for it. I'm like,
Ooh,
I love that idea. I'm going to use that if you don't mind. And that's the best way to get started, in my opinion.
love it. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. When you think back on your entire career now and your life, if you could call that young lady coming out of Virginia when you went to college up there, and tell her anything, what if you could tell her something? If you could just call her on the phone, and of course, now back then it was payphones in the dorm room, right? You're standing in the hallway of the dorm or whatever. You're like talking to yourself. What are you saying? What are you telling her?
I think my biggest piece of advice to my younger self would be to have gotten up in front of people, and even though I was scared to do it, to talk in front of people.
Huh.
I was terrified to get up in front of people, to the point where I would get temporary laryngitis. And
Wow.
it's a scary prospect, getting up in front of one person, 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, and more. And I got a coach. And it took me from unable to do it to taking every opportunity to get out in front of people as much as I can to practice.
Cool. So were you an introverted high school, college kid? Were you quiet, introverted, shy type?
Not so much quiet, just really would not like a podium, the concept of a podium, a platform, group of friends, no problem. But I'm the only one talking and everyone's listening. That was not my comfort zone. Now I dropped out of music.
I was just going to say, you were a voice major. I mean, that's those don't go together.
Yeah. No, I like singing in front of my teacher.
Can you still sing? I bet you're a pretty good singer today even, huh?
I can do a tune or two.
I should have prepped you on that ahead of time. Can you play an instrument too?
I play a little bit of piano, and I had taken some lessons because I'm classically trained. So I was opera.
I see.
So I learned how to accompany myself a couple of years ago to do some basic, Beatles songs and things like that.
Now I'm going to ask you something else. If the answers to this, your cool factor is going to go up by 10. When you go down to visit your mom in Nashville, have you ever been in a bar, club, or whatever, and just the band's up there, and you just kind of went up there and played and sang with them for a song or two? Have you done that recently?
I used to do it actually in Chicago and sometimes in Toronto.
Really? Really?
At charity events, they would try to get me up on stage, and I have a song that I'll get up on stage and do if anyone asks.
Oh, really? Okay, you have something in your back pocket there that you can do if you need to.
I do.
That's pretty good. That's pretty cool. All right, last question for you, Sophia. If you, and I ask this, to everybody that comes on the show, if I asked you to put your core purpose in life into a sentence and didn't let you tie that to any immediate family, kind of pushing it away from your immediate inner circle family for just a minute, what would that sound like? Your core purpose in life?
My core purpose in life is to help those less fortunate or underrepresented. That's a better word. To help the people who are underrepresented, to be a voice on behalf of others, to help them shine. And
that ties right to your company, right? Love it.
It does. I formed pro bono programs for large corporations, and then moved on to Fembot. So my mission in life has always been to help people.
I love it. By the way, I didn't ask you, Fembot. How did you come up with the name?
It was over cocktails. I wanted something that represented woman, but was not as obvious. And so came up with that half with one set of friends, with the femme, the French word for woman, and then the bot with another set of friends, because I wanted something that signified money and spending, but again, in a more subtle way. And then of course there's the Austin Powers factor that makes it a really cool word.
And by the way, for the listeners, fembot.com, FEMME bot.com, fembot.com, right? if they
Yeah,
want to learn more.
BOUGHT, like purchased.
Did I say it wrong? BOUGHT. Sorry. I said that wrong. Fembot.com. Well, Sophia, congratulations on everything you've done so far with it and your career overall. I greatly appreciate you being on the Riderflex show and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. This was great. It was a really nice conversation.
The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.